How's it going, everybody? This is Dailies to Downloads. My name is Chad. With me is Eric. We are back at you this week. And this week, we are going to talk about how we're recording this on March 11th. So it is a year since really this whole COVID pandemic thing really became serious in America. It didn't start on March 11th, obviously. We know that. But it was on March 11th that, the WHO, the World Health Organization, the WHO, not the band.
The WHO put their foot down and
Roger Daltrey,
exactly.
The World Health Organization declared a pandemic. The NBA shut down its season. Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson tested positive, and President Trump banned travel from Europe. So a lot happened in the span.
Do you know where you what you were doing?
It was just a regular day for me, my friend. Yeah, it was. I mean, I was working and things.
It would probably been like 10 at night. 11.
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. No, in the evening I was just at home, and
I think you're like, it's just a regular day, man, at that dive bar. Said, time to go home, old man. Like, not tonight.
Yeah, no, we were just at home, and I remember, I think my wife was doing something else because I was telling her what was going on. I was like, Tom Hanks,
yeah,
NBA. And she was like, "Oh wow,"
It was funny because I was at a Broadway musical, and Bob Dylan's the Girl from the North Country.
That's right, because I remember I texted you.
Yeah,
and you told me when you got out you were flooded with text.
Yeah, because I'll always keep my phone on airplane mode, and even at intermission, like I don't turn it on. But as soon as the show ended, everybody in the theater turns their notifications back on, and all the chatters, "Oh my God, the NBA should do it." And I'm just like, what? And like, I kind of hate that because then you can't. I mean, this is a once in a lifetime thing, hopefully.
Right.
But like, I couldn't process the show. I just like walked out into Times Square, and yeah, like with the Tom Hanks news too. Like at that point, it was all still relatively new that we didn't know anything about it, the severity or what have you.
Right.
So at first, when I heard about the Utah Jazz player Rudy Gobert who had it, I was like, is this like akin to like when Magic Johnson announced like the HIV? I mean, he's still with us, obviously, but like that kind of like shocking.
Yeah, there was a lot we didn't know. We knew of the virus. I had heard about it, and obviously you mentioned the NBA player.
Yeah.
Other than that, I wasn't taking it super serious at that
time. Oh my God, I remember people posting all these funny photos of the Corona beer. That feels like a lifetime ago now.
It does. It really does.
But that's when that's the first time I'd ever heard of it.
Yeah, and when we were preparing for this topic today, I was thinking to myself, like, what was the last movie I saw in the theaters before this began? And I should preface this by saying I used to go see movies all the time in the theater, and that was pre-marriage and pre-kids. And now I don't get to the theaters as much as I would like to, because honestly, it's easier to get a digital copy online or to get a digital version of a movie online and just watch it in the privacy of my own home. Because after a day at work and, having 3 kids to raise, you're tired. And so if I have to go see a movie and I have to wait until the kids are getting put to bed, and I have to wait to see a movie after that, if it's like a 2-hour plus movie, like I'm struggling sometimes. But that is, middle-aged problems. But
now with this pandemic, now you're like, man, I'm telling those kids to tuck themselves in. I'm going to the first movie I can.
Well, see, and we'll get into that. And so the last movie I saw, the reason I say all those things is not to open up about my life, but to say the last movie I saw was on January 12th, and it was 1917. So that was the last movie I saw in the theaters. And I was looking back on my Letterboxd profile to look at all these, and there was a lot of movies I saw preparing for the award season and whatnot, but those were all movies I had to get digital copies of. Jojo Rabbit and Harriet and things like this. Those were all movies that I watched digitally. So 1917 was the last movie I saw in the theaters, and that was a great movie to see for a theatrical experience. To be honest. But what was the last movie you saw in theaters before?
Uh, so as you mentioned Letterbox, I was just bringing up mine because I think I know, but I may there may have been one more that snuck in there.
See, for my wife, it was Little Women, and it was in
Uh,
mid January as well. She went with her mother, I think. I didn't end up seeing that one, but yeah, both of us, it was in the January time frame. So
so for me, it's funny. The last quote unquote new movie I saw was The Invisible Man, the remake, the Elizabeth Moss one, on February 29th. Okay, it was a leap year last year. Wow, who knew? That was the first sign that trouble was on the horizon. And then I had actually went to a friend of mine was presenting a screening on 35 millimeter at the Alamo Draft House of the don't laugh. Again, at the time, I didn't know this would be the last movie. It was the 2005 House of Wax remake with Paris Hilton, and
oh wow,
if you remember that. And
paid for
look,
this?
if I would have known that that would have been the
Did you pay
last,
money to see this?
no, 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 it was free because she
Oh,
was like
free.
hosting it. So and
What date was that?
that was on March the 3rd.
Okay, so yeah, you were into March
Yeah,
when you were seeing movies. See,
I'm telling
'cause
you,
you
it,
see movies in the theater a lot. Being in the city.
yeah.
Um, so it makes sense that I figured yours would be much later than mine.
And that was, and then yeah, and then the Broadway show on March the 11th. And that I'll always remember. Couldn't
Right.
tell you anything about the show, but I'll remember that night.
Well, and so the question is, based on the fact that this is the 1 year anniversary, and I would assume most of us out there haven't been to the movie since, there are states that have movie theaters open, and we will talk about some of those box office numbers as we move along here. So obviously there are people still going to the movies, but let's talk about what we miss about going to the movie theaters and possibly what we might not miss. So I'll let you start with this one, Eric. So do you really miss going to the theaters, or have you settled into a, well, I don't, it doesn't really matter at this point?
Um, well, I'll give the typical non-answer where I go, well, there's a little bit of both. Where, where I have, as we've talked about in the past, like not on my phone, but like I've always like had to like adjust a little bit more um to based on my living arrangement or where I'm at that, like watching on a laptop or whatever. So like I don't necessarily have like a home theater entertainment system, whatever. So watching at home is usually like on a laptop or if I have a display, I can try to it's all use HDMI for my laptop. But so all that I feel like it's required me in this past year also to like have more um patience and
Broaden
again
your horizons, so to speak.
yeah, kind of adjust. It expedited like I was begrudgingly moving along, and it's kind of pushed me because that there was no alternative
Right.
once everything shut down. And so I've gotten a little bit better at watching things at home. But what I do miss about that theater experience then is there is something about starting it. You're with other people. It can't you can't stop it. You're in a place with a big screen. Your attention is not elsewhere. And sometimes that's a little bit harder at home because
Right.
the freedom is sometimes something I don't like having in those experiences.
Right.
And if I can look at my phone or if I'm anticipating a text or an email that's on my mind and then I'll stop the movie. So I do kind of miss the physical aspect of being in a theater, and your attention has to, by virtue of you physically being in front of a giant screen, has to be given over to that. That's just like a personal thing. I guess I could adapt myself
Right.
even further, but I do miss that going out and going there.
Well, and for people like you and me, being in the theater and having to watch what's in front of you is a given. Unfortunately, the theater
Sure. Yeah.
experience for others is not like that. And people will be on their phone and people will be doing whatever else they're doing. And that can be annoying. And I'll kind of sidetrack, I'll get in more into that. But when I was thinking about this today, I unfortunately I came to the conclusion that I don't miss it as much as I thought I would. I do miss it to a certain extent, and one of the reasons you just brought up was a very good point. The other reason I miss it is the fact that it was an option. The
Yeah.
fact that it's not an option now makes me miss it to a certain extent, because there are movies I can tell you right now that I would have seen in the theater based on what you just said, the fact that I would have had to be there and totally focused on it. And the first one that comes to mind is Tenet, which I still haven't seen
Gotcha.
because
Yeah.
I can't watch, I'm not going to watch that in increments. I can't.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that I can't based on how complex people have said it is. So if that was definitely a movie that I would have seen in theaters, it's Christopher Nolan movie. His movies always lend themselves to the big screen anyway. So I do miss the fact that I had different options. Now I really only have one option, which is to watch movies on my television, and that's the other part of it. And like thinking about this, when we did a show about this early on, about movie watching during a pandemic and how that affected us. And I made comments then that I thought that this was an opportunity for the theater chains to really up their game, to make their experience better, to make like the event of going to a movie theater more welcoming and more comfortable. And I don't think they've done that. I think that they're all just literally waiting for this to end. And I think in their heads, they think that this is just going to go back to normal.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that is foolish to think, simply because, yes, will ticket sales increase when a lot of us are vaccinated? Of course they will, of course. But ticket sales were not good before the pandemic. So imagine what they're going to be like post pandemic, when people, a good portion of them, will probably still be somewhat paranoid and not be willing to go to a theater because, as I didn't know, kids, you can't get vaccinated until they're like 16.
Oh, just in general? You.
And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I was told. So,
Mm.
I mean, my kids are all very young. So, do you roll the dice with stuff like that? So, I really don't think that ticket sales are going to be through the roof like they think it will be. I think they had opportunities to make it better, to really make a theater experience stand out. Like, I mean, I would have been, if I was in one of those conference rooms, I'd be screaming about it. I'd be like, we need to, we can use this time to show people why going to the movie theater is a great thing. And
Yeah.
I don't think that they've done, I could be wrong, but I don't think they've done anything.
Yeah. It
So
feels like we've had to go further steps back, because now the whole appeal is come to our theaters. We're going to be clean. And
right.
I'm like, if that's your selling point in 2021,
And like you were saying before we got on, some of the theaters in New York don't have, like, they don't have concessions.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
like, I can't. I'll be honest, and I would assume other parents echo my feelings here. I cannot imagine bringing my kids to see a 2-hour movie and
yeah,
saying to them, "No candy, no popcorn, no soda."
yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously people bring their own stuff, but like, I can't imagine. Can you
No,
imagine saying that
it
to a little child?
definitely, yeah, and they definitely seem like, again, like very behind the times thing. Like even at IFC Center, like, well, to make sure that your experience is as quick as you want it to be. Now the show times are actually when the movie officially starts, not the trailers. And again, these are things that maybe would have been inventive 20 years ago. But
Right.
it's nice that a global pandemic is like, hey, we can clean the bathrooms. So it feels like we're a little really slowly moving in the evolution chain.
Yeah.
And yeah, and somebody had asked on Twitter the other day, where you said, like, people are on their phones and being distracting in general. Well, what if somebody takes off their mask?
Right.
Who's gonna stop? Like, there's gonna be, you want how many viral videos of unfortunate freakouts have we gotten in public over the past year? What's
Yeah.
gonna
And
happen in theaters? How's people gonna enforce this?
what are you going to do if somebody takes off their masks and start coughing?
Yeah, exactly. I
You
mean,
know,
like, nothing. Like, we
what
know
do you
what
do?
happens when people are disruptive in a theater. Nothing. You have to go out and tell someone and deal with it.
Are you going to
Yeah.
tackle them like the people in that Bath and Body Works video did recently
Yeah,
about the soap?
exactly. Yeah,
You know,
those were they were employees, right? This, it's
I mean, if you cough, you know what? If somebody takes off their masks or gets on their phone, and all of a sudden you have like 3 or 4 AMC employees tackling you to the ground, I would. Oh God, I would love that. I
that's maybe like you could have like they should install like a little buzzer on your armrest that therefore you don't have to move. You just click the buzzer and like this is like you have this on airplanes since the 1970s. I feel like it's like
Alamo Draft House thought they had a novel way of doing things.
oh
AMC
my
is going to
God.
come out here with like security guards.
It's crazy. Like AMC is like I was reading an article where it's like they lost like $2 billion at least, and they were bankrupt. And then like the CEO gained like another 20 million. Yeah, yeah. It's like the pandemic has shown the whole rich getting richer kind of thing. So it's like, well, why do they feel the need to adapt?
AMC was one of the businesses that got helped with in the whole GameStop
Oh yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
And
Oh,
I saw that, and I like because I knew how bad they were doing, and I saw that how much money they made in like one day, and I
yeah,
was like, how does this doesn't teach us anything, like,
yeah. Sure, yeah, yeah.
but so yeah. So on that note, like, there's part of the theater experience I miss, and then the parts that I didn't miss, like that got me tired of going to the theater before the pandemic. I can't say I'm eager to get that back. And like you were just saying, put in the added risk of there are going to still be people that are sick that might not want to wear their mask, people that don't want to get the vaccine. There's a fair share of them out there. So you put that into the normal issues you face in a theater. How fun is it? So it's going to be a case where I more than I did before am going to have to really pick and choose like the types of movies I want to go to the theater to see. And
Yeah.
chances are it would be a movie for just me. Or like in the rare case that my wife and I have a night out alone, like it would be a movie for the two of us. So,
Yeah, and it does. It's funny. I don't know why my mind thought to this, but there is a really cool. I walked by it once, so I followed their Instagram. In Montreal, there's this still operating adult movie theater, and I'm like, what is this real? And like still work. So and I watched their Insta stories, and they're like, oh, we put new safety guards on. I'm like, look, I don't know who was sitting closer than 6 feet apart under normal circumstances in that theater,
yeah.
but now you definitely and I need look I need a plastic shield when I go to that theater anyway. I'm like whatever extra precautions you're taking now. I'm like okay, I'm glad a whole row to yourself. I hope so.
We
Like
need cubicles. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, really. I hope.
Feel bad for the people that have to clean that theater. Uh,
Or
but
maybe they're more prepared than anyone for the pandemic.
yeah, they're like, we got it handled. Like I don't know what the worry is. So, so yeah, it's an interesting environment that we're in right now, and obviously, some theaters have opened, and some theaters have stayed open. There have been box office totals, and I was looking up some of these figures, but just to put things in context, in 2021, the year we're in right now, the total grosses right now we have worldwide grosses. Um, America has one movie in the top 10. One. So, and that movie is Tom and Jerry.
Ah, okay.
Tom and Jerry is number 7 in the current, as I speak about it right now, the current worldwide grosses. Every other movie is a foreign movie, and most of them are from China. And that is the big history moment here, that China has overtaken North America in the box office race. And so I guess some analysts had
In
predicted that that would
American,
happen at one point down the road, but this like really sped that up in a major way, because I was looking at the 2020 box office totals, and the top 3 movies are from China,
hmm,
which to me is really fascinating. The first time in history that that has ever happened, that we have movies that aren't from Hollywood. And the biggest grossing movie in Hollywood was Bad Boys for Life, which was a shade over it was like 204 or 203 million.
Yeah.
And just to compare that, the 2019 box office totals, the top movie was obviously Avengers Endgame, which made like 853 or 858 million dollars. So that's an over $600 million difference. Had Bad Boys for Life come out in 2019, its grosses wouldn't even put it in the top 10. So that just goes to show you, what we're in right now. And like so many other records have been broken. Trolls World Tour last year, well, it was the first movie since Titanic to get 9 consecutive weeks at number one.
Well, I mean, these stats. I mean, like there was some story about some people
There's
like
an
renting it
asterisk
out of.
next to all of them, right?
Yeah, yeah, like exactly. It has to. Somebody like had rented out a theater and like bought all tickets so that they would track in like the top 10 or whatever. So again, the GameStop theory.
Right.
Where all these things are due to the pandemic, obviously, and also what we started seeing too was we haven't spoken about drive-ins was a thing again. More so than is regular. And I feel like some of those grosses may have been reported as well, even though I don't even know how one would begin to do that. But
And that's the like I looked at a bunch of different sources. One of my sources was Wikipedia, and they mentioned that in their chart that a lot of the totals were from drive-in movie theaters, and therefore were harder to track.
yeah,
So
yeah,
a lot of weeks and a lot of movies don't have accurate box office totals as a
yeah.
result of that. And I forget.
I mean, that also like raises the whole like transparency thing that I think a lot of studios don't want to report their numbers ever, and Netflix doesn't. So if Netflix movies are in a theater, they're not going to report their numbers. And
Right.
like it's I think it's also more of those blurring of the lines that is going to become even more and more frequent, which uh again, when you're withholding data, I guess it's like not, I don't know what I guess you don't need to necessarily,
It's
but
interesting when you mentioned Netflix. Like, for example, like going forward, a lot of movies will be released on Netflix. Still, not that they
oh
like
yeah,
they have been, but like you compare it. Like, how do you compare it? Like, you'll have a movie released on Netflix, and that movie might be 5 times as popular as a movie that's in theaters,
hmm,
but you don't know how popular it is, and therefore the movie that's in theaters that's number one, they'll report that as number one at the box office, when in reality the most
yeah.
popular movie, non-related to money, is not a movie that was in theaters at all.
Yeah, and I think that's also like the big scariness of that future, because as the studios have gotten stronger, I feel like, due to the pandemic, and they got even more leverage, and so now they all stocked up on their own streaming services. Paramount Plus is going to say 45 days in theaters, and then on Paramount Plus for Top Gun 2 and Quiet Place 2 and blah blah. And we've normally, this would have seemed unheard of before the pandemic. Now the theaters are kind of at the mercy of all these studios with their streamers.
And, and yeah, and to your point about all these new streaming services, like, these studios aren't just going to toss those in the garbage when this is
Oh yeah,
done. Like, they are investing a lot of money and time to make Paramount Plus and HBO Max and the Peacock Network, whatever you want to say. Like, they're investing a lot of money in these, so it's not like that stuff's just going to fall by the wayside. And like, there's still going to be a lot of exclusive movies on these streaming services. A
I
lot of
think
movies that, where you just mentioned, the window from theater to streaming is so short that everybody is going to ask themselves, well, just we can wait.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then as most people will just think, well, if I'm already paying a monthly subscription,
Right.
why would I go to a theater anyway? So
Right.
it's definitely, like you said, you like having the choice of being able to in a theater. I feel like that's going to become even more of a thing. Movie going is going to become even more niche.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's going to be more of an event, and it's going to require movies that are more of an event. And I know that you might disagree with what I'm about to say, but thinking in the future of movies that are an event that might bring people back to the theater in droves. Right now, Marvel is in a state of flux, I would say. Their slate might be, you have Spider-Man coming out. So Spider-Man, if it does come out towards the end of the year, that might be one that brings people back in droves. If I'm still alive by the time the Avatar sequels come out, I would say that
The
one.
pandemic sent him back another 20 years. Yeah.
So those are the two that come to mind right away that would, at least push the needle more
Yeah.
in the green. But
It's just that, so I don't know. I'm very unfortunate that, like, even before the pandemic, these were the movies that were pushing out the smaller movies out of theaters. And now it seems like you had to kind of fight for saying why these other movies deserve to be in a theater and seen. And now it seems like that's going to become it's going to be blockbuster or a blockbuster film, or it's going to be a streamer. Unfortunately, it seems like we're separating those two even more now.
and this is what I'm saying. Like, I swear, like, we're talking about how it's going to be it has to be a certain type of movie to get people out of their houses. And I swear, if the theaters come back and suggest, effing 3D, like, as a reason, like,
Yeah,
then it's just like they need to think bigger, and they need to think more in the future, and they need to think whole experience, not just, visuals, like, look at this axe, I'm going to throw it and it's going to come right, like,
yeah.
like, they need to think about other ways to get people into the theater, and they're just not doing it, as you were saying earlier, they're not doing it fast enough.
Yeah, and like we've talked about on a previous episode too, that idea of uh, because of when something's released on a streamer, it kind of fades faster from the public consciousness and how we talk about it.
I've been talking a
Um,
lot about that with people that aren't avid moviegoers,
yeah, yeah,
about that very theory that you had brought up the first time, and
yeah.
it is really true.
And if it wasn't for us now talking about like year-end awards, that's what's keeping, even more so than in a normal year. That's what's keeping these films in to the degree that they are in the public consciousness.
Right,
Uh,
podcasts, articles online, all that stuff,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but you just think about things like Wonder Woman 1984. If that would have opened in theaters for, it was like 2 or 3 months, it would have had a life to it. You talking about?
Yeah,
I feel like with HBO Max, within 48 hours, it was done.
gone.
And it just seemed to have been complete. They put, I mean, I'm sure it did very well, and I'm sure they're happy with the results. But it's just funny, you put like $200 million into this thing that can be hate watched on Twitter, within a couple hours, and it's like, oh, this movie's problematic because it does this. Like, oh, wow, it didn't even wake up yet, and it's already killed. Uh, it just seems to be moving so much through too fast. Like, it feels even
It
more
was
like
already a done deal, like you said, a day after. People,
yeah,
you wake up, you haven't seen it right away, and people are like, "Oh, I've moved on to the true crime documentary that's on Netflix."
it's
We
true.
we watched we watched Wonder Woman right away.
It's like whatever the new Netflix, true crime thing or whatever. I'm like, oh, what is it? What, Free Britney? What's happening? What's happening in Britney?
Yeah.
And then like boom, like that, like they flip a switch and it's gone, and then it's just
Nobody's talking about her now.
completely out of the public view again. And
We
it's
did a
just like,
whole show on it, and nobody, like, it went nowhere.
yes. They're like, we got to free her. What can we do? Nothing. All right. Well, what else is coming up? It's like it just feels like, I think that's also a part of, like, social media, internet. Like, our attention spans are definitely shorter. And if we don't have a movie, like, think about the kind of movies that you discover because they're literally in a physical space for weeks or months, and that keeps it in someone in a public view,
It's harder to do that, I feel like, now, like, thinking back on movies that had cult followings, like, what even is that now? Like, I mean, thinking, and this is just a movie that popped to the top of my head. It's not like it's the most notable cult following movie, but think about a movie like Boondock Saints. Like, it's much harder now for a movie to build a cult following in that way. Like, you have word of mouth, you have people passing around the DVD, or maybe if it's a movie that can air on television, people check it out over time that way. But it's harder to do that now. Rights to movies are a bigger deal now, where certain movies go, and if it's all on streaming, then it's harder to convince somebody to watch it. a friend or a family member. I can't tell you how many times people will be like, "Oh, what movie should I check out?" I'll mention one or two, and oh, well, I'm not really in the mood for something like that. And because it's there in front of them,
Yeah.
they don't have the urgency to be like, "Well, he said to watch it." It's not like, "Here, I have the DVD. You have to watch it now."
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely. Yeah.
So
It's that kind of thing of like if you're holding a book in your hands and you're on a train with no Wi-Fi, I mean, you're going to read the book. I mean,
right,
it's as simple as that. I mean, I just feel like the reason like a lot of people were talking about the Invisible Man, that remake too, is I think because it opened in theaters, people were like, oh, this is really good, and it like started having a like it was like number one again the next week, and that was its own news story, and so it goes
yep,
on the news cycle again. Whereas if it would debut on HBO Max, I feel like again by the end of the weekend that would be it.
right.
That's what I worry about going forward. That's going to be even harder to just keep up with releases, and you really have to make even more of a job at doing that.
In a way, when we were just talking about on our last episode, we talked about awards. Like the awards is a very big deal in that loose way because the movies that win, the movies that get notoriety, are movies that are getting a second life.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. Yeah, and
So
and,
it's
and
important,
that's where I feel like everyone thinks, oh, if something's streaming, that just means Netflix. So,
right?
oh, I heard of that. That's like my mother. I don't know if I said this before, but like my mom really wants to see The Father, and
Right.
she's like, "How do I see it? That's the commercial says it's out." I'm like, "Well, it's in a theater." She's like, "A theater? There are no theaters open." She's like, "It's not on Netflix." I'm like, "No." And she, she's not gonna remember it, but it's just, it's like I think it just kind of comes and goes. And imagine if the Birds of Prey to go for like a year plus. So that was like the last quote unquote big superhero adjacent movie
Right.
to open before everything shut down. Though, I'm like that could have easily been an HBO Max thing that would have also just I mean, it did kind of get forgotten due to everything that happened
Yeah.
after, but
That one would have definitely gone to HBO Max right away had it
yeah,
come out.
yeah.
But yeah, it's and so it'll be interesting to. I'm interested to see if I actually go to the theaters before the year's end. Um,
You gotta do it. You get a hazmat suit, just, just however you plan on doing it. It's also
I'll have
gonna
to take a
be
day off work, and I'll have to go like early in the morning when I know nobody's going to be there.
take a rapid test during the movie. They give it to you, they give you the result when you come out. It's also gonna depend on last year. The whole thing that kept stopping theaters from opening is because like no studios wanted to do it if like there was only going to be a handful of theaters open, right? And
Right.
now I think there's still like theaters are starting to reopen, but it's at like 25% capacity. And it's like, well, we if we're going to open up Fast and the Furious 9 that we spent like $200 million on, we want 100% capacity. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's also going to be it seems like we're going to have a somewhat normalish summer, but we're not going to be at 100% capacity. So it's going to be a give and take there.
Right. And like the reason that we won't be at that capacity anytime soon is because, I think it was maybe under a week ago. I think like 10% of the population has been
Yeah.
vaccinated. So, like, I mean, there's a lot of people that live here. So, so it's going to take a while for everybody to be vaccinated. And then, as I said, not everybody wants to be vaccinated. So, this is going to be a constant part of our lives, which is
I guess, yeah.
something I
I guess
talked about in the other episode that we did, and that's what I was trying to communicate is that this is here with us now. So you need to roll with those punches and figure out a way to make the experience more palatable. So
yeah, it'll be the rest of this year is gonna. I definitely, I just have the urge, just to see something, just to, I just, but who knows what that will be and what I imagine if we do a year in review at the end of the year, it's gonna also feel like another decade has passed based
and
on
how
where we
weird is that going to be? Like, because I didn't really complete my top 10 on Letterboxd. Like, it's pretty much done, but like, I didn't complete it fully because it's such a weird period. Like, I always went by, stuff that was eligible for Oscars. And now, like, my 2021 list will have movies that
are.
people kind of look at as, well, that was last year, wasn't it? But
Yeah.
no, Promising Young Woman came out this year. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. I think yeah, that and also the idea of what's theatrical film versus what's a streaming movie. All these like superficial, categories are now those lines are blurred even more where I used to like the New York Times used to have to like review every single movie that was opening theatrically in New York. And they have gotten kind of thrown that out, that policy.
right.
And now they're covering a lot of things that are streaming as well. So it's all in the same page, and it's just part of the new reality
Yeah.
of going forward. And I think because theaters probably won't be able to operate at full capacity, that's again going to keep them on a leash about like we're going to keep our streaming service powerful, and you need us to keep going anyway.
Yeah, and like you were saying, I didn't comment on that earlier because I was talking about the streaming services, but you were mentioning how the studios have a lot more control now and a lot more leverage now, and that's absolutely true. So it's certainly a different era that we're heading into because of that. And
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like after that gigantic announcement for Disney Plus, which I think Disney Plus was the one that benefited the most from the pandemic, in terms of the amount of subscribers they
they're doing
got, and
really
then
well. Yeah,
yeah, and Hamilton and Soul and everything that they had in the pipeline. And then when they did like that investors meeting like 2 months ago and announced like the next 5 years of projects, all for like Disney Plus, it's like billions of dollars being put into this. It just
right.
seems like that going forward is the priority.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I mean, and you look at, and they are doing really well subscriber wise. But if you look at what they're doing in terms of some of their premium movies, $30 for Raya and the Last Dragon. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just not going to happen when we know that that movie will eventually be on there for free.
yeah, it's very strange. I don't get why they did that for Raya and Mulan, and that
Yeah.
was it. Like, they didn't do it for Soul. They didn't. I'm like, I see what they're
And yeah,
doing.
just by comparison, you mentioned Mulan. That movie was also, when it first was released on Disney Plus, it was $30 to watch it at your home with your family. And now I could go online right now in some of my Facebook code groups and I could get that code for $4.
Yeah, I'm watching the movie as we're speaking right now. I'm up to, but that's another movie where like by virtue of going to see movies in theaters, I saw the Mulan trailer for like 6 months,
Yeah.
and then when I'm like, oh, $30, not gonna do that, and then eventually it was on the regular free Disney Plus. I mean, not free, but
Right, and that's what I meant.
eh,
So it's for free if you have Disney Plus. If you don't
yeah,
have it for free and you just want the code, then
yeah,
it is
yeah.
that cheap to buy now. So
But by that time, by that window passing, I feel like nobody even talked about Mulan.
no,
Like that was another one I thought was gonna be a big thing, and then like due to the $30 thing, it's just like people just moved on, didn't care. Like,
that was also a weird one to be like the first one because it was a live action version of an animated movie, but it was much more adult in nature, and it's not like there's any songs, so it's like to show that to your kids, it has to be a special type of
it was.
viewer to want to watch it.
I don't know what Disney's do. I mean, if they would have done that with Hamilton, you would have had people ponying up. I don't. If they, Soul, Hamilton, those are the ones you should have done it for.
That's,
Not.
you know what? I never even thought about that. That's
I don't-
absolutely true. If they had done that with Hamilton, their people would have absolutely paid for
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people were signing. I signed up for Disney Plus that week. It's like $6.99, and I'm like, damn, that's incredible.
Yeah,
And they would have put an extra $30 on it. I don't know. I guess I would have done it.
yeah. I mean, I get all the Mighty Ducks movies. What?
Oh
Like,
God, and there's gonna be a new Mighty Duck series. All
yeah,
the
yeah.
all the
You know
old
what?
IP,
So,
man. All the old IPs coming back to haunt you because it must until the end of time.
side story about the Mighty Ducks. So I own all those on DVD, and my DVD collection is somewhat mixed up now. So I was like, well, it's probably on Disney Plus. So we showed the kids the Mighty Ducks on Disney Plus, and a lot of the music is not there. And it didn't occur to me that that would be the case. But when you think about it, like for instance, the end, during the big victory thing, you have Queen, We Are the Champions, but that's
Yeah.
not there. in the Disney Plus version, which I was like, shoot, like, this makes it not great. Like,
I mean, I think that, yeah, that also kind of goes to the idea of like the studios always sort of secretly like hated home video. Like the fact that a consumer could own a copy, I think they never liked, and that's why Disney always did like, we're putting these movies in the vault, blah 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 blah.
yeah,
And you're right, because now these things are, we used to laugh about Lucas going back to his Star Wars movies, but now these things are continuously in production. The
yeah.
Mighty Ducks is not the same Mighty Ducks that you saw as a kid. And there doesn't state that,
But I am
out
anxious
of,
to see the series.
but even like somebody was talking about, I think it's on Disney Plus, Splash, because they have the Fox library.
Right.
And same thing when Daryl Hannah, nude, runs into the ocean, they made her hair longer, so it's covering her bare ass.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
so these are things that like I feel like that kind of thing should be illegal. Like that kind of film history that can be altered at any time.
Yeah.
um Someone's going to run with this and say it's a cancel culture thing. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that like it does make things a little bit more fluid in terms of who can go back and change something or alter something. The whole Greedo, it all goes back to the Star Wars stuff.
Pepe Le Pew for life, man.
I mean, who knows? I mean, I only thought Dr. Seuss wrote 2 books. Apparently, he wrote more books. I don't know how he came up with all those rhymes. But yeah, I'm sure there are enough examples on. There was, sorry, I'm going on a tangent now, but I was thinking of, there was a rumor that Final Destination, the first one, was on Netflix, and there's this whole, someone wrote an article on some stupid movie website about how in if you've seen the movie, they're on the airplane and everyone gets a premonition that the airplane's going to crash, whatever, and one guy kind of like goes like this, and he's the character that winds up getting killed, but it looks like a suicide. And
Right.
they said Netflix got complaints about a content warning, and so they took that scene out. Everyone freaked out, and it wasn't true. The movie's not even on Netflix. But so everyone freaked out over nothing. But that is the kind of thing, again.
That could happen.
Yeah, music rights.
Right.
Look at the wrestling stuff. Theme songs change all the time.
Yeah.
There is no artifact of the history that's it's scary in a way. I mean,
That's why owning some of the physical copies of these things is a big deal.
imagine seeing a Scorsese movie in the future without like the 50s songs, and it's all just modern music from like, it's a waiting room of a doctor.
Yeah.
It'd be sad. You see 8 Mile and it's all Ja Rule songs. Like, sorry,
They're in the
catalog.
public domain.
Yeah.
All the Ja Rule songs.
Yeah, it's like YouTube, SoundCloud, whatever.
Mystical and Ja Rule in the Eminem.
The catalog was cheaper, guys.
All we could afford.
We had a 10-year licensing agreement that we just lost.
Whereas
Yeah.
this guy sold us his songs for life, so it's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we can't get better than that. Mystical and Ja Rule. So on that note, let us know how your year has been, your year of movie watching. And please, I want full stories too, so let us know what the last movie you saw was. I'm sure this will get a lot of hits. So please let us know, and check out my other show, which is The Nitty Gritty. And for Eric and Mystical and Ja Rule, my name is Chad, and we will see you next time.